Welcome to the Books Brothers podcast, where each week we read, discuss, and challenge each other to become better men, and have a few laughs in the process. The Books Brothers are currently reading The Mask of Masculinity, How Men Can Embrace Vulnerability, Create Strong Relationships, and Live Their Fullest Lives by Lewis Howes. This week, the guys discuss the athlete mask. Athletics and competition are great, but, like anything, it can be taken too far, and winning and dominance can become a strong source of identity for men. And when that dominance and identity are taken off the sporting field and into our homes, it can often have negative effects, not just to ourselves, but to our family and friends around us. We'll discuss how sports and athletics shaped us growing up, the positive and negative effects of putting our identity in sports, and how we handle our competitive drive today. After the show, please share your comments and feedback on the athlete mask discussion by emailing us at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com.
Now sponsoring Po' Boy's Cajun Seasoning for all of your fish needs.
Lemon pepper seasoning. Robbie Rose lemon pepper seasoning.
Dude, I love me lemon pepper. Put it on everything.
If you don't eat lemon pepper, you're not a man.
We've got to have an ad for a tool that you use to scrape old chicken off of the pan.
Oh, snap. Do you have a roommate that likes to cook eggs? Raw dog? You need the super scraper, and you might need a new pan too, because the super scraper don't even work when Rob's used it.
Dude, we never had like butter, olive oil, coconut oil, Pam spray.
Don't even start, Rob. We had everything you needed.
Yeah, you just left that chicken breast on there. Pans. Oh, man.
Dude, I still have that video of Stalin standing over the sink when the sink is so full that it's touching the faucet, and he can't even fit the scrubber underneath the faucet to scrub something underneath because somebody left all these dishes. We probably all left all these dishes in there, but that was awesome. I missed that.
I'd never seen Adam mad before that. I had never seen Adam mad
Adam
before
was pissed at the dishes.
That was mad Adam, and it was like still not really mad, but it was
that
like
other time I got really mad was whenever Thomas put all the broken chair pieces in my bed. because the next morning I was like, Thomas, like, why is the chair in a bed? And you said he said either Matt or Rob said Adam broke the chair, and I was like, yes, Adam Flessner. Like, it was Adam.
Wait, what did I do?
You jumped off Thomas's chair to dunk the ball, and it broke the chair.
Were my pants on or off?
What did we ever do with that basketball hoop that we got off eBay that was like actually
probably broke? You probably broke it. Huh?
I don't think we broke that. That one was like metal.
Rob didn't even know what the rim felt like because he couldn't commit.
Oh, snap.
I didn't want to break it, man.
I mean, dude, we have to admit, those ceilings in there were super low.
They were super low.
That's why
I'll never forget the jump ball with Adam Repo. We tried to do a jump ball, and I just nut tapped him like crazy. He fell down. You remember that?
He's such a nice guy. He didn't deserve that.
He was like ready to jump.
That's why Repo became a Marine.
All right, boys.
It was that moment that he knew. So this week we are going to discuss chapter 2, which is the athlete mask. And before we get into it, I wanted to mention a little bit of context. I wanted to talk about the author a little bit, and I wanted to talk about our group as well, because that definitely colors the perspective that you have on this chapter. So our group of guys at Books Brothers, we were all pretty into sports, I would say. We were all pretty athletic, interested in those sort of things. And I know we're probably going to have a lot of examples of how this aspect of our lives shaped us, good or bad. So I'm looking forward to the discussion. But as a listener, you might not have been serious about athletics or sports, and that's okay. Understandably, you may not fully appreciate the author's perspective when he talks about these things, athletics and sports in general. But I bet there is something in your life that you could compare this to in terms of how seriously you took it and how much it shaped you, and maybe how much your parents pushed you into it for good reasons, but maybe some of those things turned out to be negatives in the end. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of context about the author before we got into the athlete mask. So Lewis Howes grew up focusing on sports as a way to improve himself. His father was by his side coaching him and cheering him on. Athletic achievement naturally became a largely positive source of motivation and self-esteem in his life. However, his childhood wasn't without struggles. He was abused at the age of 5 sexually. His brother was incarcerated for drug charges at the age of 8. He said he often felt dumb and lonely in school because he was bullied for being in special needs classes. And it seemed like early on he could rely on athletic achievement as something he could control in his life. And it was a convenient distraction from probably any negative thoughts or feelings he had about himself. As he grew older, he continued to excel in sports, and as a senior in college, Lewis's father was left in a coma after being in a car accident. After waking up 3 months later, Lewis said his father wasn't really the same as it pertains to how much he cared about his sports achievements. He said it didn't really matter to him anymore, which I think was a pretty big shot to his pride and probably to his relationship with his father. Lewis continued his athletic career after college. In college, by the way, he earned the title of All-American. He was a football player and decathlete, and then he went on to play arena football for 1 season, but that was cut short by an injury, meaning he had to deal with the realities of not being able to hide behind this athletic mask anymore. So, yeah, Lewis discusses in this chapter, by the way, all this stuff, I didn't get all of it from the book. I did a little bit of my own research. He had quite a few podcast episodes from his podcast, School of Greatness, that had information, and he's written other books as well that I was able to find some of this info off of. But Lewis discusses how athletics and sports shaped him and other high-level athletes that he knows in this chapter. And he likened an athlete to a modern-day gladiator whose weapon isn't death but domination. And he mentioned that it felt like dominance in athletics meant dominance as a man. And he starts out the chapter with a quote: "He's a man who destroys himself running for a finish line that doesn't exist." So I just wanted to open it up to you guys. Anybody have any examples of how sports shaped you growing up, positive or negative? And was there ever such a thing in your mind growing up that it was possible to be too dedicated to sports?
For me, no. I never thought that I would have been too dedicated to sports. I never had that motivation or calling, or whatever you want to call it, to be so dedicated to a sport that it defined my life. I loved sports. I played a lot of sports growing up. I played soccer and baseball in elementary school. I played basketball for my middle school. I played tennis in high school. Played a ton of sports just with friends for fun, like volleyball and ultimate frisbee and golf and random backyard games. Garrett and I used to play with a group of friends our senior year about 2 or 3 times a week, playing sand volleyball. And that was so much fun. One of my favorite memories of growing up. And we actually got pretty good. Getting into college, like trying out for the fraternity volleyball team, I was pleasantly surprised that we were better than most of the people who had like grown up playing volleyball for their schools. But I don't know. I've been blessed with athletic ability. I was never like the best at any one sport, but I was good at pretty much every sport.
You're super coordinated. That's the thing about you. I feel like you're like the most coordinated. Like Matt can just pick up anything and be good at it, I feel like.
especially an N64 controller.
I was just going to say that.
His greatest sport of all.
Yeah.
Never forget the first time I beat him.
In his blood, obviously, but
I was very good at ping pong. I wasn't the best, but definitely in my blood.
I think I put a lot of my identity throughout like middle school and high school in sports. So I played soccer, football, and baseball in middle school, and I was very bad at baseball, and I was okay at football.
The meatball? Didn't you have the meatball?
Yeah, floater pitch.
Floater pitch. That's what it was. Yeah.
But I was pretty good at soccer though, and like starting in 7th grade, I was playing soccer year round, and that was something that I was on a travel team, and we got like ranked in the state, and I feel like that was something that I put a lot of energy and a lot of time into, and I kind of I really related to Lewis when he's talking in this chapter about, I feel like what I was like when I was reading it, I was relating to it in putting identity in sports. And I would say that I put my identity in athleticism and sports at a younger age. And it was something that was just very important to me. And it was something that my mood on the week would depend on it. But I know Adam knows about this. I don't know if the rest of you guys know about this, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I actually fractured a bone in my back and I had to take like a year off of sports. And I remember like as a 16-year-old, like wearing a back brace at school. And then when that happened, I also I had like allergic reactions and like hives and like I had shingles my sophomore year. Sophomore year of high school was just awful.
that's rough.
And
Isn't that what made you get into physical therapy?
yeah, so I mean, really, that was like what like brought me into like the injury is what grew my interest in physical therapy. Having like lost my identity in sports and in soccer is something that played a huge role in like my spiritual and the faith journey. It was something that I think that as the things I put value in were going away, I put value in more things that really seemed to matter. And that was also a time where I feel like I'd connected a lot more with friends, like whether it be friends in the church or my friend group. And, you know, obviously that Adam and I knew each other at this point. And I would say that was probably when we started hanging out a lot more. It was probably sophomore year. I was kind of in a transition in life, and a lot of the group that I was hanging out with before then, I was losing interest in that, but really like losing soccer for that year was awful at the time, but it's something I look back on, and it was a huge defining moment for me.
I feel like when you're growing up, sports is kind of like a caste system for school almost, in terms of where you fall, in terms of how popular you are, how cool you are, maybe how other guys view you as whether you're tough or not, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in band and I played trombone, but I also got into sports. And I just imagine without the sports side of that, I would have been judged so much differently in like middle school, junior high, high school. And so my parents never really pushed me to do anything, honestly. But I think the reason I got into sports and stuck with it and applied myself is because of the social benefits, to be honest. I think I was always excited to, you know, improve and whatnot. But I think the fact that I made so many friends and the fact that I felt accepted a lot of times was really what motivated me when I look back to be good at sports.
Yeah, I think for me, I've had a lot of reflective experiences that drive me, you know, kind of embarrassingly even to this day. Not so much anymore, but there's still hints of them. I just always enjoyed sports. I don't think I was ever pushed to be competitive or anything like that from my parents. They were always like very supportive, like, what do you want to do? All right, we'll support you to do that. Super competitive from a young age. I mean, I remember like if like the Chiefs would lose on Sunday, it was like, you just don't talk to Garrett for a couple hours. He needs to like recover. Just like super competitive. And then in high school, didn't make the basketball team as a freshman, and I came from a private school where I was like pretty good. So kind of like hit a bottom, worked really hard, made the teams, but ultimately like senior year, there was a lot of, you know, just unfulfilled expectations, a lot of, I would say, misleadings playing football. Yeah, there was a lot of kind of pain where I was just kind of like led astray and wasn't. I learned a lot coming to the fraternity There was they were diametrically different experiences where in high school I was performing in fear of not making a mistake. And then I came and it's like intramurals, we're just having fun. And then like you like play and like Matt said, it's like, yeah, we're pretty good. And then you have like a group of guys that are like behind you and like, yeah, like you are good at sports. Go crush the other fraternity out there or whatever. I performed, I think, I kind of joke, but I feel like I hit my peak athleticism in college. And I don't think there was a huge shift necessarily. Only 1 year of time had spanned from my senior year of high school to my sophomore year of college when the chapter voted me the sportsman of the year. But I think it was like a mental thing where like it was, I hope I catch this ball or I make this block or I'm going to get chewed out publicly in front of the offense. And then you go like fast forward 1 year and you got a bunch of guys and they bring the sororities and they're like, you guys are awesome. Let's go win the championship. Just like encouraging and like performing out of a position of people are confident and encouraging me. That's just been very like something I've reflected on a lot and just how your intrinsic motivations can impact your performance in anything. Are you performing based out of fear of losing something or are you performing based out of, hey, like if I screw up, I'm not going to get benched by the chapter. It's just intramurals kind of thing. But a lot of that still has driven me where I worked hard for something and coaches kind of built me up. They'd make plays for me in practice and then we'd never do them in the games. And the last playoff game, I went from being a starter to like, I played like 3 plays and no one ever had a conversation with me like, hey, your performance is declining, which it was. And so we're going to put this other guy who's better than you. You know, that would have hurt, but I would have rather someone just told me that. And so I think a lot of times from that point on, 15 years later, it can be something where it's like, all right, someone thinks I can't do something. I'm going to work my tail off and prove them wrong, which can be wrong motivations and can be motivated by anger. And yeah, it's like if I'm performing well, then I'm accepted and then I'm good enough as a person. Mm-hmm. And so there was a lot of formative experiences in that high school to early college time frame that have still kind of stuck with me even to this day.
Yeah, that's good, Garrett.
Yeah, being benched isn't just about your athletic ability, right? It's deeper than that because I do feel like you find yourself feeling beneath maybe some of your peers in a deeper way than just, okay, I'm not as good at running as him or something.
So for me, answering this question, I'm still growing up. I think we all are men and we're all growing up, but I don't think I really put my identity necessarily in sports. I think what, Garrett, you're maybe talking about like competition in general, right? On page 51, It says winning arguments and being competitive is proof of someone behind the athletic mask. So that could be like debate team, or that could literally just be you're having a conversation with someone and you want to prove that your point is right, So I feel like I struggle with more of just the competitive nature in general, not necessarily always linked to sports, right? So like, can my output at work prove that I'm running rings around other people, Like, what does the review at the end of the year look like? I think some of those things I struggle with even today, which is the whole competitive side rather than sports itself. But I will share a story that I've been thinking about as I read this chapter. So I played golf with some 18-year-olds that were basically seniors going into college that I'd been walking with through youth ministry for the past 2 years. And these kids, they can smoke these drives and their golf game's pretty good. One of them played for high school and I never played for high school. I'm a bogey golfer, but these guys were spanking me, man. And my whole identity that day was like slowly declining. Like my manhood was slowly declining because here I am, a 32-year-old man, and getting spanked at a game that I've played longer than these guys have honestly been alive. I walked out like super defeated, like, wow, I'm walking next to these guys after a round and they probably think that I'm a joke, you know? But we then had a fall retreat that same day where I was able to lead both of these guys about things that actually matter, about men struggling with habitual sin, with pornography and masturbation, and being able to be a witness to them in their lives and showcase that, hey, whether you sink a 20-foot putt doesn't matter. It's about your soul and it's about your sanctity and it's about being a man that really counts. So that was just like a full circle, like, wow, I felt really bad, but then the Lord redeemed just the goodness and what it means to be truly authentically man.
Great story, man. Yeah.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
Broga classes. Discover the ancient art of broga, where downward dog meets spilled my beer. Dive into poses like the remote deadlift, the couch crunch, and the pizza plank. Master the balance of Zen and Z's. Broga. Namaste right here with my snacks.
That last part is so fun, dog.
That's one of the best. Namaste.
And now back to the show.
Rob, that reminds me, I played tennis in high school and I played tennis a lot with my dad growing up. And by the time I started playing in high school and probably halfway into the season, I'd just gotten better. And when I would play with my dad before then, we would pretty much be 50-50. I'd win half, he'd win half. And once I started playing more consistently, I would beat him like every time, and I'd beat him by a lot. And I still remember it was probably my sophomore year or maybe like late in my freshman year where I had a time I was playing him and I was just playing very poorly and he was beating me. I essentially was being a sore loser. And so I think it was an interesting situation because I remember when I finished playing with my dad, he basically was like, I don't want to play with you anymore because the one time I actually beat you, you get like all this attitude and all this like sassiness and anger and frustration. And it was interesting because I think as guys, the idea of like competing with our dads, it feels like something that is very ingrained in us. And especially like, as you mentioned, Rob, competition, sports, but really sports is the cover for it, but it can be a lot of different things. But I was competing really with my dad. And similarly in that scenario, I feel like my dad reminded me of like, this is a game. Like, don't forget, this is a game. And he, in that situation, got really upset with me, but basically eventually talked to me about it through like how, if you're going to lose, like lose well, like lose better than that. And I still remember that story because it was one of these situations where, I think at that age, all that mattered is competing well and not making a fool of yourself. But obviously there was a bigger lesson to it.
Yeah. Flez, what do you got, man?
Nice job, Mr. Stalin.
Yeah, I mean, growing up, I played, fast forward to high school, varsity basketball, varsity baseball. I played soccer for 2 years in high school. Stalin, we talked about that last week.
Yeah, buddy.
13 seconds freshman year, Rockwood Summit High School.
You're really proud of that 13 seconds.
Are you still talking about soccer?
No, to give the backstory on that, all of our guy friends played soccer and all of us like played on a travel team. And Adam played on the freshman team and made the team and ended up being like a starter for the team and played forward and did really well. He ended up scoring like a lot of goals that year. And it was just funny because, you knew like you weren't playing as much as us, but here you were doing really well.
I didn't ever think that. I thought I was just having fun with my buddies. You know what I mean?
But,
it was just like athletic. Yeah. But anyway, like, baseball was my sport. I was going to hitting lessons. My dad was paying for me to go to hitting lessons with, he at one time was a scout for the Florida Marlins when they won the World Series. So the guy had a World Series ring. And I was just really dedicated to baseball mostly, and then kind of playing basketball and soccer for fun. Went to a showcase at Missouri State and played on Hammons Field there for a day. And I was looking to play in college possibly. And a funny story, I remember there, they rated all your attributes based on what college level they thought you could play. and like D1, D2, or D3. And I think I got mostly D2, but they gave me D1 hands. Do you remember this, Adam? No. And I remember taking the sheet back to Summit, back to school, and being like, D1 hands.
You're competing for Rob for the best hands in the Midwest, I
guess. But I ended up getting hurt. My elbow just died on me. I just had really terrible, I think it was probably lateral epicondylitis, just tendonitis in my elbow.
Don't you go dying on me.
But I was popping like 1,600 milligrams ibuprofen every day before practice just to try to throw a ball. And it was like, all right, this is, looking back, it's like, it's probably a little too into that, doing that, in high school.
You were getting high back then, man.
Ibuprofen.
Ibuprofen over here.
We'll have to cut that out. We don't want people thinking that Adam was a drug addict.
Well, ibuprofen is a drug.
That's funny. But yeah, I mean, no, like I can relate. I mean, I'm going to probably jump the gun here talking about Steve Cook a little bit, but yeah, I mean, like I can relate to a lot of that stuff. Like this chapter kind of hit me hard, obviously, but with the whole powerlifting thing, going through a divorce. And I know once I got hurt in baseball, it was the gym, it's like, I think I've always had to have something competitive.
Yeah.
In my life. And if I don't, it's like, I think a lot of that is a result of just having always moved in some capacity. And it's like some sort of structure for movement, honestly. I don't see that as a bad thing necessarily, unless it takes over, obviously, like anything else, though. But I think, going from powerlifting to the gym and getting too into that. I mean, I talked about all that last week. But I can relate, I think, most to the relationship aspect of this now, and having to win conversations, like in an emotional relationship. I have to really, really I have to be very careful about that and be like very aware in conversations. Otherwise, I tend to be like that to an extreme. Like I have to not necessarily have to win, but it's like I have to, no matter what, like they have to see my side of it. I can't, like I just have a hard time. I don't know. It's something that I have to really work on. And I don't know. Do you guys relate to that at all? Like in your marriages at all? Like, do you have a hard time with that? Or has that been something that you've had to work on over the years?
The whole team aspect of this chapter, talking about, being in a relationship with a woman and her feeling like instead of being on the same team, you are competing against each other. That's something that I feel like early on I identified between me and my wife, but it was still hard for me to change my actions. We would have conversations and remind ourselves, hey, we're on the same team, right? Yeah, we're on the same team. But then again, it was hard to kill that habit of, well, I need to have the last word here so that I feel, like you said, heard, or, so that I feel like my ego's satisfied in this instance or about this subject. So I definitely feel like, as a competitive person, I'm a lot better at that than I used to be, but it was a problem.
Yeah. I think I still
can relate to that too.
Struggle with that. Right. I mean, I know I've struggled with it early on of having to have the last word, having to make sure she knows, hey, well, this is really what I meant, or I didn't really mean it that way, or whatever. I think you quoted Dale Carnegie, how to win friends, influence people, but you can't win an argument. If you win, you lose. So the moment that I try to get the last word, I lose. But I think for her, she just wants to be seen and understood and listened to. And I'm over here trying to win an argument that she's really not trying to have. She just wants to be seen.
Ruth and I talk a lot about, we'll use the phrase like falling on your sword. And like, I feel like in a relationship, you're going to have times where you have to just fall on your sword and be like, I'm not going to win this one. And like, that's okay. And I'm trying to remember the author, but it's a book about marriage. It's the guy, John Gottman, I think is his name. Steve Gottman, John Gottman. But he did a book about marriage, and he talks about how keeping the problem, and like how your spouse is not the problem, but the problem is the problem. And so trying to like find resolution with that in light of like, the male desire, or like just the human nature desire to like want to win an argument or win a discussion. Yeah. Matt, I know you were about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say that I can relate, Fles, a couple different ways. I was never super competitive for sports, but I was still competitive in some capacity. And if there are times when I'm playing a game, or even like a board game, or like fantasy football, where I feel like I should be winning, but I'm not, and I have no control of the outcome of how these games are played, like it's all chance, but I still feel like I should be winning, then I get mad. And I've come a long way, especially with fantasy football. Like I would get mad if I lost in fantasy football when I first started.
Until you do an illegal trade with your wife to win it and go into the playoffs.
I'm going to cut that part out, Rob.
Wait, what happened?
What happened?
Emily and I were in a fantasy football league, and we decided to do a trade that I immediately rejected after it was accepted, because I was like, I can't do that. It's collusion. That's not right. And now everyone's still giving me a hard time about it. But anyways,
that's funny.
Yeah, like if Emily and I are just playing a board game, and it's gotten a lot better over the last few years, but I would just get mad that she was winning and I wasn't, and I felt like I should be winning. Yeah. Or when it comes to arguments or things like that, I feel like I'm very narrow-minded in what I want to say and what I want to get across. And it's hard for me to, especially in the moment, hear other people's points of view or different perspectives and take that into consideration in the heat of the moment. I'll think back on it later, but at the time I just get frustrated that I'm not getting my point across. You're not understanding what I'm trying to say. I don't want to repeat myself. So I just get mad and I kind of shut down.
I think that, like, Matt, what you're saying there, that has everything to do with this chapter and talking about like the athlete mask, because really it's competition, really what I think it comes down to, as Rob was alluding to earlier. And, all these examples in this chapter were pro athletes. Well, obviously you heard from our stories, it sounds like we were all some major athletes, but none of us were pro athletes, nor did we play in college.
Yeah, but you feel
JV, I'm the guy.
You are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you feel like it's so important in the moment that you win every single time. That's all that matters is winning.
But and I think that definitely bleeds into how really it's like we have this mask of like competition, like this desire to, I think it was Thomas, it was one of the first things you said, like the desire to like dominate. I mean, you see that play out in work. You see that play out in like people that you're conversing with, where you're trying to basically one up each other. I remember I worked with this guy at the first clinic I worked at, and me and my manager would make up fake stories that were ridiculous because we knew he would try to one up it. And so it's like,
I love that. That's hilarious.
Like kind of curious what he would say, and he every time he would try, and it'd be like some crazy story, and he'd still try to one up it.
What do you think the root of that is? Do you think it's like not just him, but like all this, like dominance? Like, why do we want to be dominant? Like, do you think it's
because we feel insecure if other people are better than us?
Like, is it like I have to be better than everyone?
I always felt like I'd get left behind. I'd be out of the group if I couldn't at least keep up. In terms of
so not good enough to be included.
Yeah. Like I just was always afraid that I would fall out of favor because he can't even do this or whatever, right?
You want to stay relevant because, like he said, and you remember those days at recess, getting picked towards last or not getting picked first. I mean, you remember those things.
I think
and then it trickles down into how you perceive yourself in other things.
I always got
especially as a little kid.
Yeah, you were probably the team captain.
I'm just kidding.
I remember being like, very envious of Matt, just like Matt a lot, because I would train, I would practice, I'd lift weights. Matt shows up, he's like so skinny,
so fast,
eats whatever he wants, and then he just like shows up and he's like better than me, and I'm like, I would be so mad. I would be so mad. What were you gonna say though?
Yeah.
Sorry, Garrett. I didn't mean to.
Yeah, you did.
I'm better than you, and I know it.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that quote for the last 5 minutes.
Sorry, Liz.
No, you're good.
Sorry, go ahead.
I think my core drive is love, intimacy. So like if I'm not seen as like, if like I'm doing well or like winning, then I'm like, I might not be loved. I think that's what drives me.
Yeah.
Like on a deep level.
Yeah.
It's not good, but
it's a lonely, if you're an athlete, that's such a lonely place to be, right? Because you're putting all your effort into being loved for your athletic ability, but deep down, nobody actually knows who you are and loves you for that. Right. And I think that's what a lot of these pro athletes said is like, after I got hurt and I couldn't play anymore or whatever, I realized nobody actually knew who I was. And I didn't even probably know. So
I want to bring up Steve Cook again though, because he's actually somebody I followed for a while, and I actually met him last year at my gym in Honolulu. No way.
He was here working out. Yeah, I saw him and I was like, that looks exactly like Steve Cook. I saw his quads. I was like totally admiring. I was like, man, dude has some solid trunks there. But so this guy he was interviewed by Lewis Howes in one of his podcast episodes like 7 years ago or something. And he played college football and ended up being a pro bodybuilder after he won like this model search. And he said his parents pushed him really hard into athletics to kind of run his energy out because he had a lot of it as a kid. And he just talked about how his parents had really good intentions, but maybe the fact that he put so much stock in athletics and his ability set him up for failure later in life when he didn't have that all the time. And he mentions in the podcast episode, and then this gets into the book, that, as men, we all kind of grow up watching masculine figures on TV like Arnold or Stallone and like action movies, or thinking about like the lone cowboy is the most masculine, strong thing you can be. But he points out that the fact that those guys in those movies sacrifice for others, those are the things that we think we just like them because of their looks or their muscles or whatever. But the fact that they're putting aside their own interests for others is what we actually are attracted to. And I thought that was really cool because I think that's true, and then he mentions you're better at sports and you're a better athlete also when you put the needs of the team first, typically. So it's just a win all around if you don't think like that.
Let's take a quick break for a word from our sponsors.
Are your shoulders so big that you can't fit? Are your shoulders so big that you can't fit through your doorways anymore? Are those shoulder days now causing problems for your accessibility? Now introducing Doorway Widener. This sledgehammer eliminates the need for contractor remodeling, and allows you just to easily knock out walls at your convenience. Why hire someone to widen your doorway when you can bang out those walls yourself? Doorway Widener.
I think that would be a good product that'd be a good product for Fles to use. And now back to the show.
Thomas, were you going to ask a question with that? I had a thought. If you didn't,
no, go ahead. I just wanted to mention that because like Steve Cook is actually somebody I've followed for a long time and look up to, and I think he's one of the guys in fitness that's actually calling out a lot of the shallow aspects of fitness, cool. and trying to go a little bit deeper so that I think the younger guys who follow him don't get misled into putting all their energy into stuff that doesn't matter.
I'm just kind of curious in light of what we've been talking about. And obviously we're all guys that are active, involved in athletic pursuits still, fitness, that kind of thing. I'm curious, where do you all feel like you're at nowadays with in your relationship with Athlete and Mask? Do you feel like at this time, do you feel like you have a healthy relationship with your competition level, with your athleticism, or do you feel like it's something that you're pushing too far into, or what do you guys think?
I'm still scared to lose my athleticism, I think. I push myself to a certain extent because I'm afraid if I don't week to week that I'll lose part of that. I think I still put a lot of stock in that as part of my identity, and hopefully it's a lot more positive, than it is negative, but I'll admit I do.
What does that look like, Thomas? Like, what specifically when it comes to what athletic or fitness things are you putting?
I would say being overly concerned about not being able to meet a certain workout schedule, or not being able to meet certain standards in terms of maybe how I look or my weight, like having a certain amount of muscle. That's also something that Steve Cook mentioned he struggled with, was just the feeling of always feeling like you need to look a little bit bigger or be a little bit bigger. I know Flez and I have talked about that quite a bit, but yeah, I think that, it's a losing battle too, right? Because unless you want to get on certain things that probably aren't good for you in the long run, you're never going to grow into an older gentleman and have that same level of performance. So I've gotten a lot better though. I'd say that the last 5 years, I've come to terms with the fact that, as I get a little bit older, my standards for that stuff don't make sense anymore.
And the reason why, I guess really what I asked it, because I was thinking for myself, and, I've been doing long distance running, marathons and ultra marathons now for 5-6 years. And there was definitely times where I put way too much value in doing that, being involved in that community, and what I got out of it. I even recall one time getting in a argument essentially with Ruth, and I just was done with it. And I went and just ran hill repeats, and it was totally me just escaping and finding a way to cope with it. But I found that really I had to, and Adam and I have talked about this a lot, because as I was prepping for fatherhood, I knew I needed to really back off on how much I was running. I knew I couldn't be gone 4 or 5 hours on every Saturday anymore. And so I don't maybe love how I feel fitness wise right now, but I love being able to be there for my daughter right now. I love being able to be there for my wife. And I think I'm finding a healthier relationship with fitness that I think that I have struggled with in the past. I think with fitness in the past, it's been something that I have put on the pedestal of the most important thing in my life. And I think finding balance is challenging, but I think being able to prioritize what's important. And, I'd like at one point to be able to do long distance running again. And I'm still doing some running, but it just looks different right now because, I have a 12-year-old daughter, and that's most important right now.
Yeah, I think since marriage is when that really started to change for me, because I wanted to spend more time with my wife rather than going to play volleyball on a random weeknight. I would have to say no to those friends because I wanted to spend more time with my wife. And yeah, I don't play nearly as many sports as I used to. I used to play all the time, a couple times a week. But now it's, I don't know, maybe once every 3 months that I actually do something sports related. And usually when I do, it's just to hang out with friends. I just want to connect with people. But yeah, that's been a big change for me. Just making priorities for relationships that I want to work on and people I want to connect with. For me now, when I work out or play sports, it's either a way to connect or just to try to stay healthy. Yeah. Health in fitness is a really good thing overall, but I want to be healthy. I want to be able to play with my kids whenever they're in sports. So I just try to work out for health reasons at this point.
Yeah.
On page 58, they say removing the athlete mask allows for creativity, culture, new experiences, connection, which is what you really hit on, balance, and time for other things. So I think we've all kind of hit on some of those things. I know, Flez, you used to spend hours and hours in the gym, and now you're doing hikes and doing crazy things. And I think you're falling in love with new things that you realize are giving you greater fulfillment rather than that extra hour in the gym that you ultimately know is probably wasted time.
exercise is depression's greatest enemy. So it's complicated. And so, yeah, it's, but you can get exercise from other things than just, doing one set of 3 at 550 on a squat and sitting there for an hour.
Sounds good.
And having some Sour Patch Kids. Although, I mean, Sour Patch Kids slap sometimes,
Slap hard.
Amen.
Yeah, it's, exercise is medicine. But yeah.
Those kids know how to slap you real good.
Do you guys know anybody who, like, all of their relationships are based off of sports in some fashion? Do you guys have any friends where the only thing you talk about is sports? And if you think about, what else do I know about this person? You actually don't know anything. You just know you're both into, like, the Chiefs or something. Because I feel like growing up in the Midwest, that's like half of old dudes.
Yeah,
seriously, it's like that kind of surface level stuff is what their whole relationship's based on with a lot of their friends. I don't know, that's kind of sad, right?
I think though you can bridge that gap though by like continuing to be active and participating in active pursuits, like using that competition instead of just watching that competition. I feel like one of the activities that I find to be a really great just time with hanging out with a friend is doing like a hike or something like that. And I think, it's an athletic pursuit, but drastically different than just talking about a sports team because you're engaged in activity. And so I think, can you bridge the gap and instead of watching or, just being a viewer for the sport, can you continue to participate in it? And I think men in general, that's like a way that we always are able to connect better with others is by being active together and, competition essentially.
Do some broken.
Thomas, your comment, like I have pinned down like page 49 where he's talking about how like the psychologist equates sports to soap operas for men. Where we actually
so good.
Connect with others. That's where we express emotion and joy. And I think what Flez said, what you guys have said, like we talked last week, these things aren't bad in and of themselves.
Yeah,
right.
It's when it gets taken too far. Like sports aren't bad. Exercise not bad. It's when like I have to like dominate because that's the only thing that's going to make me feel good enough is winning. And then I'll be accepted by other people. And then I'll finally be enough. Well, then that never ends, right? Like the material mask, that's how it, like someone always has more money. That's like, I distinctly remember after the Royals won the World Series 8 years ago, I remember where I was, the feeling, the elation. And then within realistically like 2 minutes, I was like, wait, so like, what's next? Like, we're just going to do this again next year. And it's easier to say that, like these rich guys talking about how money's not that important. Like, it's a lot easier to say that right now. The Chiefs have won 2 Super Bowls. Like, we're in a winning state. So I'm aware of that. But I do distinctly remember, I was like, man, like, I always wondered what this moment would feel like when my team won a championship. And then it was like, it lasted for like 2 minutes. And, it's like when we can just put too much stock, it's like, then I'll feel like this, or then I'll be good enough. And it's like, man, sports, exercise, athleticism, it all has its place in helping with our mental health and depression and community, right? Like when I watch Chiefs games now, I try to intentionally watch it with others because then that's a way I can build relationships with other people. I try to make it a very intentional time. And so, yeah, I'm obviously glad that I have some championships, but also on a personal level, it's like, wow, I never realized just how much time I spent. Like, when are we going to win? Are we going to win? And it's like, it is literally just a game. And it is a source of entertainment and means for connection that can be taken way too far. And like, that's where our identity is. And then, we can know people. And the only thing we talk to them is Chief stats and something Stalen said a few weeks ago. Can't even remember what I talked to my wife about, but I can remember Royals baseball players from 2003 when they went 9-0 and set some records. You know what I mean? So
it's a good point. I don't want people to think we're hating on sports, but it can't be taken too far.
Kind of miss sports sometimes. It's just a different viewpoint here, but I used to watch every single Cardinal game. I mean, like I said, I loved baseball. I loved college basketball. And then I went through like that super terrible time in my life, and I came out of that with a completely different perspective on life in general. And I haven't watched any sports since then. And it's interesting. It's kind of like, man, like I used to watch every Cardinal game, and I don't even know like who's on our team anymore. Granted, they're not very good.
They're terrible
anymore.
Yeah, but
maybe that's
where the Royals are
maybe
worse.
That's it. Maybe that's what it is.
Hey, we're still better than the Royals. We're still better than the Royals this year, so we got that.
Gosh, that was the other thing. Matt Brown being better than me in sports, and then all the stinking Cardinals fans at Missouri State. Oh my gosh. That's like one of the only reasons I wish we won in 2014, because I have this stat where since the Royals have been a team, the Cardinals have won 3 World Series and we've won 2. So I just remember like the Cardinals are so much better. And I'm just like, you guys are about the same. And I was like, God, if we had only, and it's like, why do I care so much about this?
I always thought it was odd. That Cardinals and Royals people in Springfield would go at it. I'm like, I don't even think of the Royals.
Yeah,
like, that's why
we get so mad
like that, dude.
But I think of the Cubs. Like for us, it's the Cubs.
Yeah.
Like it's the Cubs and the Cardinals. It's not the Cubs or Cardinals and the Royals.
When did the Royals get moved from minor league baseball? Is that? I mean, that's been like 6 years ago, 7 years ago. I thought they were still in the minors.
Come on, man.
In Missouri or are they in Kansas?
Got him.
That's actually a fairly common conversation once you get out of Missouri. Like even in Oklahoma, only a 5-hour drive. It's like, yeah, so is Kansas City in Missouri or Kansas? Like once you get out of like Missouri, like people associate Kansas City with Kansas.
Yeah. One last thing from the book that immediately made me think of Rob is the quote that he puts in here. It says, "Do things that develop your brain and your heart and not your biceps."
Oh, snap. Big Rob. Just advise every day.
Just said your brain and your legs.
Oh, snap.
Oh, got him.
That wraps up our episode for the Books Brothers podcast. Next week, the bros will review and discuss the third mask, the material mask, on pages 61 to 82. If you haven't yet, buy or borrow The Mask of Masculinity, How Men Can Embrace Vulnerability, Create Strong Relationships, and Live Their Fullest Lives by Lewis Howes, and read along with us. Check out the episode's show notes for the link to buy the book or to borrow it from your local library. Thanks for joining us for this week's episode. Please subscribe and give us a review. We would really appreciate it. Also, please consider sharing this podcast with a friend or family member who you'd think would get something out of it. Finally, we'd love to hear from you. If you were challenged by our conversation or have any questions or feedback, email us at connect@booksbrotherspodcast.com. Thanks again, and we'll see you next week. Until then, read, reflect, and connect.